It was a Tuesday when the galaxy decided humanity needed to go. Not Monday, which would have made sense, given how everyone feels about Mondays. Not Friday, which at least would have given us the weekend to panic properly. No, it was Tuesday, that most unremarkable of weekdays, when Ambassador Quixel of the Galactic Council of Superior Beings materialized in the United Nations General Assembly, like the world's most pretentious party crash. Picture this. A 7-foot-tall walking crystal chandelier with delusions of grandeur and a voice that sounded like someone gargling expensive wine. Quixel literally sparkled as he spoke, which would have been impressive if he wasn't delivering what amounted to a cosmic eviction notice. "Beings of Earth," Quixel announced, his crystalline form refracting the assembly hall's fluorescent lights into annoying little rainbows that danced across the delegates' faces. "The Galactic Council of Superior Beings has reached a unanimous decision regarding your species' continued existence in this universe." President Elena Rodriguez, who had been having a perfectly decent Tuesday until this point, raised an eyebrow that could have cut glass. She'd dealt with hostile foreign leaders, economic crises, and that one time a cabinet member tried to declare war on penguins. This was just another Tuesday crisis, apparently. "After extensive deliberation and careful observation of your chaotic energy patterns," Quixel continued, clearly enjoying himself, "we have determined that humanity represents a contaminating force in the cosmic order. Your unpredictable nature, your tendency toward emotional outbursts, and your baffling obsession with something called reality television have disrupted the serene balance we superior beings have worked millennia to achieve." General Marcus Stone, a man who looked like he ate nails for breakfast and used sandpaper as a washcloth, leaned forward in his seat. "Are you seriously declaring war on us because we're too interesting for your taste?" Quixel's crystalline features somehow managed to convey smugness. "War is such an inelegant term, General Stone. We prefer to think of it as mandatory universal beautification through selective species removal. We are giving you exactly 72 Earth hours to surrender unconditionally, after which our combined fleets will commence what we call the Great Cleansing." The Great Cleansing. President Rodriguez's voice carried the same tone she used when discussing particularly stupid budget proposals. "Did you workshop that name, or did it just come to you in a moment of cosmic inspiration?" "The name underwent extensive committee review," Quixel replied, apparently missing the sarcasm entirely. "We considered the big oopsie and humanity goes bye-bye, but focus groups found them insufficiently dramatic." General Stone stood up slowly, the kind of movement that usually preceded someone getting their face rearranged. "Let me get this straight. You're threatening to wipe out 8 billion people because we're too spontaneous for your liking? Among other things, yes. Your species has introduced concepts like YOLO and hold my beer into the universal consciousness. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to maintain cosmic dignity when 3/4 of the galaxy is now attempting something called the floss dance?" President Rodriguez rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on that would probably require industrial-strength aspirin. "So this is about dancing? This is about order versus chaos, Madam President. Your species represents everything that is wrong with unguided evolution. You make decisions based on emotions rather than logic. You create art that serves no functional purpose. You have something called memes that spread faster than any virus we've ever documented. Frankly, you're giving the entire galaxy anxiety." "Good," General Stone growled. "Maybe a little anxiety will help you develop some backbone." Quixel's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been indignation. "We superior beings do not require backbone, General. We have transcended such primitive anatomical needs. We operate on pure logic and cosmic harmony." "Right," President Rodriguez said, standing up and straightening her jacket. "Well, Ambassador Quixel, you can take your cosmic harmony and your 72-hour ultimatum and file them under things humanity doesn't have time for. We'll be in touch with our response." As Quixel dematerialized in another shower of pretentious sparkles, muttering something about the audacity of inferior beings, President Rodriguez turned to General Stone. "So," she said, "any ideas on how we're supposed to handle a war against the entire galaxy?" General Stone cracked his knuckles, a sound like small explosions. "I'm thinking we start with the biggest guns we've got and escalate from there." "Marcus, we don't have guns that can shoot at galaxies." Yet, President Rodriguez sighed. It was definitely going to be a long Tuesday. 12 hours later, in a secure conference room deep beneath the Pentagon, Earth's finest military minds gathered to solve the minor problem of impending galactic annihilation. The table was crowded with generals, admirals, scientists, and enough coffee to power a small city. Everyone looked appropriately grim except for Secretary of Defense Patricia Wells, who kept giggling every time someone said, "cosmic cleansing." Options, President Rodriguez announced, settling into her chair with the weary air of someone who'd already had 3 impossible conversations before breakfast. I want to hear every single idea, no matter how insane. General Stone cleared his throat. Nuclear winter. If we can't beat them, we make the planet uninhabitable for everyone. Mutually assured destruction on a cosmic scale. Cheerful, Rodriguez muttered. Next, Admiral Janet Torres, who commanded the Space Force with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting her whole career for this exact moment, leaned forward. We launch everything we've got. Every satellite, every probe, every piece of space junk in orbit. Create a debris field so dense that their ships can't get through. So we turn Earth into a cosmic junkyard? Essentially, yes, ma'am. Dr. Amanda Foster, from NASA's Theoretical Physics Division, adjusted her glasses nervously. There's always the possibility of dimensional folding. We could theoretically hide Earth in a pocket universe until they get bored and go away. How long would that take? Well, the math suggests anywhere from 3 weeks to 17,000 years. The suggestions kept coming, each more desperate than the last. Project Boomstick involved launching Keith Richards at the alien fleet, on the theory that nothing in the universe could kill him. Operation Confusion called for broadcasting every episode of reality TV ever made, simultaneously to overload alien communication systems. Someone seriously suggested training dolphins to pilot fighter jets. By hour 4, President Rodriguez was seriously considering early retirement and a nice cabin in Montana where cosmic wars couldn't find her. That's when Secretary Wells stood up, swaying slightly from what was definitely her 8th cup of coffee. You know what our real problem is? We're thinking like adults. The room fell silent, except for the humming of fluorescent lights and General Stone's suspicious grumbling. Hear me out, Wells continued, gesturing wildly with her coffee mug. These aliens, they're throwing a tantrum because we're too chaotic for them. They want order and predictability. They're basically cosmic control freaks, having a meltdown because humanity won't color inside the lines. Your point being, Rodriguez asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew where this was going. We don't send our military leaders. We don't send our scientists or diplomats, or anyone who's going to try to reason with them like adults. We send someone who specializes in dealing with beings who throw tantrums when they don't get their way. Admiral Torres blinked. You want to send a therapist? Better. I want to send a kindergarten teacher. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments when someone suggests something so spectacularly stupid that everyone needs a moment to process the full scope of the stupidity. General Stone was the first to recover. Patricia, I think the caffeine has finally fried your brain. Think about it. These aliens are acting like spoiled children. They're upset because we're not following their rules. They want attention. They're probably jealous of our creativity and fun. Who better to handle that than someone who deals with tiny dictators throwing juice box tantrums every single day? Dr. Foster cleared her throat tentatively. It's not completely insane. Child psychology and conflict resolution do share some fundamental principles. Thank you, Amanda. See? It's scientifically sound. President Rodriguez rubbed her temples again. The headache from yesterday had never really gone away, and now it was bringing friends. Even if this wasn't completely ridiculous, where exactly would we find a kindergarten teacher willing to negotiate with hostile aliens? Wells pulled out a tablet and started swiping through what appeared to be personnel files. Already on it. I had my assistant run a search through Department of Education records. We need someone with excellent conflict resolution skills, experience managing multiple difficult personalities, and the kind of unshakable patience that comes from dealing with 5-year-olds hopped up on birthday cake. Please tell me you're not seriously considering this. Her name is Emma Hartwell, 28 years old, teaches at Sunshine Elementary in Columbus, Ohio. Master's degree in early childhood education, specializes in behavioral management, and according to her evaluations, she once got an entire classroom of sugar-crashed kids to take a nap using nothing but her voice and what she calls aggressive kindness. General Stone leaned back in his chair, looking like a man who'd given up on sanity entirely. Does she have any experience with interspecies diplomacy? She has a classroom pet hamster named Mr. Whiskers who's apparently very temperamental. Close enough. This is insane, Admiral Torres said, but she was looking at Emma's file with something that might have been interest. It's absolutely, completely, utterly insane, which is exactly why it might work, Wells said triumphantly. These aliens expect us to respond with military force or diplomatic protocol. They're prepared for adult solutions to adult problems. They're not prepared for someone who's going to treat them like the overgrown children they're acting like. President Rodriguez stared at the ceiling for a long moment, probably calculating whether her presidential library would be built on Earth or scattered across several star systems. Get her on a secure line. If we're going to end human civilization with the worst idea in military history, I want to at least talk to our kindergarten teacher first. 20 minutes later, Emma Hartwell's cheerful voice crackled through the conference room speakers with the unmistakable sounds of children playing in the background. Hello? This is Emma. I was told this was about a teaching opportunity. I have to say, the salary offer seems too good to be true. President Rodriguez leaned toward the speaker. Miss Hartwell, this is President Rodriguez. We have a rather unusual situation, and we think you might be uniquely qualified to help. Oh my goodness. Madam President, sorry, the kids are being extra energetic today because it's Pizza Friday. How can I help? Well, Miss Hartwell, it's a bit complicated. How do you feel about space travel? 48 hours later, Emma Hartwell found herself strapped into what NASA optimistically called a diplomatic transport vessel, but what looked suspiciously like a repurposed cargo container with windows. Her carry-on bag contained the essentials for any successful negotiation. Juice boxes, animal crackers, gold star stickers, a timer shaped like a friendly dinosaur, and her emergency whistle for when things got really out of hand. She'd left detailed lesson plans for her substitute, kissed Mr. Whiskers goodbye, and promised her class she'd bring back space rocks for show and tell. What she hadn't mentioned was that there might not be a show and tell if this whole thing went sideways. The journey to Harmony Hub, the neutral space station where negotiations were scheduled, gave Emma plenty of time to review the files President Rodriguez had sent her. Ambassador Quixel sounded like Trevor from her afternoon class, the kid who always insisted he was too sophisticated for finger painting but threw spectacular meltdowns when he didn't get the blue crayon. Admiral Blaster McDestroy reminded her of Marcus, who solved every playground dispute by threatening to blow stuff up real good, and Professor Intellicus Prime had all the hallmarks of a know-it-all who desperately needed someone to listen to him feel important. Harmony Hub looked like someone had taken a shopping mall, launched it into space, and decided it needed more neon lights. Emma's escort, a nervous diplomatic aide named Jenkins, practically vibrated with anxiety as they docked. Miss Hartwell, I cannot stress enough how important this is, Jenkins said for the 20th time, wringing his hands like he was trying to start a fire with his palms. The fate of humanity rests in your hands. These beings are incredibly advanced, sophisticated, and dangerous. Emma adjusted the sensible cardigan she'd worn specifically because it had deep pockets for snacks and disciplinary supplies. Jenkins, honey, I appreciate the pep talk, but I've handled parent-teacher conferences with helicopter parents and soccer moms hopped up on essential oils. I think I can manage a few cranky aliens. The moment they stepped off the transport, Emma knew she was dealing with children. The entrance to the negotiation chamber was flanked by what could only be described as the universe's most elaborate temper tantrum made manifest. Ambassador Quixel had apparently decided that simply standing around looking crystal-like wasn't dramatic enough. He'd positioned himself on a platform that slowly rotated while playing what sounded like a space opera soundtrack. Every few seconds, he struck a new pose, his crystalline form catching the light and throwing prismatic patterns across the walls. "Behold," Quixel announced as Emma entered, his voice echoing with unnecessary reverb. "The primitive representative of the Chaos Bringers arrives. I am Ambassador Quixel, speaker for the Crystalline Collective, voice of cosmic order, and keeper of universal harmony." Emma nodded politely and made a note on her tablet. Definitely a Trevor. Needed attention, craved validation, probably had some deep-seated insecurity issues. "Hello, Quixel. I'm Emma. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." The crystal being's rotation faltered slightly. He'd clearly been expecting more cowering or at least some impressed gasping at his dramatic entrance. "I am Ambassador Quixel," he repeated, a bit less confidently. "Right, I heard you the first time. Nice platform, by the way, very shiny." Before Quixel could process this decidedly underwhelming response, the chamber's far door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Through the dramatic cloud stepped Admiral Blaster McDestroy, a being that looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a military surplus store and given the result delusions of grandeur. "Where are the enemies?" Blaster roared, his voice like a foghorn filled with gravel. "I came here to destroy things and assert dominance. Who needs destroying?" Emma calmly pulled out her emergency whistle and gave it one sharp blast. The piercing sound cut through Blaster's bellow like a hot knife through butter, and the alien admiral actually took a step back, looking confused. "Admiral Blasta, I presume. Indoor voice, please. We're all friends here." What? But I am the Admiral of Destruction, the bringer of..." Another whistle blast. Indoor voice. Blaster's shoulders slumped slightly. "I am the bringer of military solutions," he mumbled, sounding remarkably like a 6-year-old who'd just been told he couldn't have ice cream for breakfast. "Much better. Now, Where's our third friend? As if summoned by the question, Professor Intellicus Prime materialized in the center of the room with a soft pop of displaced air. He was tall, impossibly thin, and had the kind of expression that suggested he'd swallowed something unpleasant but was too polite to mention it. "Ah, the human representative," Intellica said, his voice carrying the particular brand of condescension that Emma recognized from every know-it-all parent who'd ever tried to explain why their child was too advanced for standard curriculum. "I am Professor Intellicus Prime, holder of 17 advanced degrees, author of The Fundamental Inadequacy of Non-Cerebral Species, and leading expert on the intellectual superiority of evolved beings. I trust you've brought someone more qualified than yourself for the actual negotiations." Emma smiled the same smile she used when parents suggested their little angels were too gifted for consequences. "It's just me, I'm afraid. I brought juice boxes, though. Apple or grape?" The three aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey confusion, superiority, and a touch of panic all at once. "Juice boxes?" Quixel's crystalline features managed to look puzzled. "Small containers of processed fruit beverage," Intellicus explained with the air of someone translating for particularly slow students. "A primitive human refreshment typically consumed by their offspring." "I like grape," Blaster announced, then looked embarrassed by his own enthusiasm. Emma pulled out a juice box and handed it to him. "Grape it is. Now, gentlemen, shall we sit down and talk about why you're all so upset with humanity? I have animal crackers, too, but those come after we've had a good conversation about feelings." The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either a breakthrough or a complete meltdown. Emma had learned to recognize both, and she was pretty sure she knew which way this was going to go. Quixel was the first to crack. We don't discuss feelings. We are superior beings. We transcend such primitive emotional responses." "Of course you do, sweetie," Emma said, settling into her chair and pulling out her tablet. "Now, who wants to tell me what humanity did that made you so angry you decided to declare war on 8 billion people?" And just like that, the real negotiation began. The formal peace talks began exactly as Emma expected them to, with all three aliens talking at once, nobody listening to anyone else, and everyone convinced they were the most important person in the room. It was like the first day of school all over again, except with more death rays and fewer finger paints. "The humans have contaminated 17 star systems with their chaotic energy patterns," Quixel declared, his crystalline form pulsing with righteous indignation as he spun on his platform. "Their unpredictable behavior has caused 3 minor diplomatic incidents and 1 major interdimensional hiccup. They should be destroyed for their insolence," Blaster added helpfully, punctuating his statement by firing what appeared to be a laser cannon into the ceiling. Chunks of space station debris rained down like confetti. Professor Intellicus Prime adjusted his glasses with the air of someone addressing particularly slow students. "If I may interject with actual facts rather than emotional outbursts, the human species demonstrates a fundamental lack of evolutionary sophistication. Their brain-to-body ratio is suboptimal. Their decision-making processes are compromised by chemical reactions they insist on calling emotions, and they have yet to achieve even basic hive-mind consciousness." Emma pulled out her timer, the one shaped like a friendly dinosaur that she'd bought specifically because it made a cheerful beeping sound instead of an annoying buzz. She set it for 3 minutes and placed it in the center of the table. "Okay, gentlemen, here's how this is going to work. Everyone gets 3 minutes to explain their feelings without interruption. Quixel, you're up first. Remember, we use our words, not our dramatic poses." Quixel's platform stopped rotating abruptly. What? "We don't have feelings. We are crystalline beings of pure logical thought." "Right, your logical thoughts then. 3 minutes. Go." What followed was the most spectacular emotional meltdown Emma had witnessed since the Great Playground incident of last spring, when Tommy Morrison discovered someone had eaten his birthday cupcake. Quixel began with a reasonable-sounding complaint about humans disrupting cosmic harmony, but within 30 seconds he was ranting about how nobody appreciated the crystalline collective's contributions to universal beauty. "Spend millennia perfecting our harmonic resonance frequencies and do the other species notice? No. But one human ship plays something called Baby Shark on their communication array and suddenly everyone's talking about Earth. It's not fair. We were harmonious first." The timer beeped cheerfully. Emma made a note on her tablet. "Jealousy issues, needs validation, possible sibling rivalry with humanity." "Thank you, Quixel. Admiral Blaster, your turn. 3 minutes to tell us how you're feeling." "I don't feel. I destroy," Blaster roared, then caught Emma's look and lowered his voice to what was probably his version of a whisper. "I engage in tactical military solutions to complex problems." And how does it make you feel when humans don't respond to your tactical military solutions the way you expect? What came out next was a surprisingly vulnerable admission, wrapped in enough military jargon to camouflage a battleship. Blaster, it turned out, was frustrated that humans didn't take his threats seriously. Every other species in the galaxy cowered appropriately when he showed up with his fleet of doom. Humans, on the other hand, had responded to his first intimidation attempt by broadcasting something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" on all frequencies and rickrolling his entire armada. "They made my weapons officers laugh," Blaster said, his voice cracking with what might have been confusion or hurt feelings. "Laugh? During a proper military intimidation? How am I supposed to maintain discipline when my crew is giggling about dancing and never letting people down?" Emma nodded sympathetically and added, "Needs respect, confused by humor as conflict resolution," to her notes. The timer beeped again. "Professor Intellicus, your turn." Intellicus Prime straightened his already perfect posture and launched into what was clearly a prepared lecture about human intellectual inadequacy. But Emma had been dealing with know-it-all kids for years, and she recognized the signs. Every time he mentioned human creativity or adaptability, his voice got slightly tighter. When he described human art as purposeless aesthetic chaos, his hands made tiny frustrated gestures. "The most infuriating aspect," he continued, warming to his theme, "is their complete disregard for established scientific principles. They see a problem that should take decades of careful analysis and systematic approach, and they solve it with something they call winging it or figuring it out as they go. It's intellectually offensive." "And how does that make you feel?" Emma asked gently. I am a being of pure intellect. I don't experience. They make me feel stupid." The admission burst out of him like a dam breaking. "I have 17 degrees. I've published thousands of papers. I've spent 3 centuries perfecting my understanding of universal constants, and then some human with a high school education looks at a problem for 5 minutes and comes up with a solution that works perfectly and makes no sense at all. How is that possible? It shouldn't be possible." The timer beeped. Emma looked at her notes and saw exactly what she'd expected to see. 3 individuals who were acting out because they felt threatened, overlooked, or inadequate. It was the same pattern she saw every year when a new student joined her class and tried to establish dominance through bad behavior. "Okay, gentlemen, I think I'm starting to understand the real problem here. But first, let's establish some ground rules for our discussion." She stood up and pulled out a portable whiteboard from her supply bag, the kind she used for impromptu lessons during field trips. At the top, she wrote Harmony Hub rules in her neat teacher handwriting. Rule number 1, no destroying things when we're frustrated. Admiral Blaster, that means no more shooting the ceiling. But how else am I supposed to express tactical displeasure? We'll work on that. Rule number 2, no trying to make everyone else feel small to make yourself feel big. Professor Intellicus, that means no more lectures about human intellectual inadequacy unless someone specifically asks for your expertise. Intellicus looked genuinely confused. But how else will they know that I'm intelligent? We'll work on that too. Rule number 3, no dramatic performances during serious discussions. Quicksilver, that means the platform stays still and the background music gets turned off. But how will anyone know I'm important? Emma smiled and pulled out her secret weapon, a pack of gold star stickers. "You want to know how you earn recognition around here? You help solve problems instead of creating them. Every time someone contributes something helpful to our discussion, they get a gold star. At the end of our talk, whoever has the most stars gets to pick what we have for lunch." The 3 aliens looked at the stickers with an expression that was somewhere between confusion and intense longing. Emma had seen that look before, usually right before a breakthrough. "Now," she said, settling back into her chair, "who wants to tell me what you think humans do that actually bothers you, versus what you think you're supposed to be bothered by because that's what your government's told you?" The silence that followed was different from before. This time, it was the thoughtful quiet that came when children were trying to figure out if it was safe to tell the truth. Plaster raised his hand tentatively. Miss Emma, I don't actually want to destroy humans, I thought that's what I was supposed to want. My commanding officers said they were a threat, and I'm supposed to eliminate threats. But when I actually looked at their planet, they just seemed like they were having fun. I've never seen species have that much fun before." Quixel's platform lowered until he was at eye level with everyone else. "I don't really think they're contaminating anything either. Their chaos is actually quite beautiful. It's just different from our harmony. And I didn't know if different could be good, too." Professor Intellicus Prime fidgeted with his glasses. "Their problem-solving methods are unorthodox, but remarkably effective. I've been studying their approach to quantum mechanics, and their intuitive leaps are actually quite brilliant, even if they can't explain why they work. I suppose I was envious of their natural creativity. Emma pulled out 3 gold star stickers and placed one in front of each alien. Excellent work, gentlemen. Now we're getting somewhere. Emma had learned a long time ago that the most important conversations happened after the formal talking was done. It was during snack time, or while cleaning up art supplies, or in those quiet moments when children thought the adults weren't really paying attention, that the truth finally came out. So she wasn't surprised when the real breakthrough happened 20 minutes later, after she'd distributed animal crackers and everyone had settled into that comfortable post-snack lull. Quixel was absently arranging his crackers by species, creating neat little rows of lions and elephants on his side of the table. Without the dramatic lighting and rotating platform, he looked less like an intimidating cosmic entity and more like a nervous teenager trying to make a good impression. "Miss Emma," he said quietly, not looking up from his crackers, "can I ask you something that might sound stupid?" "There are no stupid questions here, sweetie. What's on your mind?" "How do humans know when they're being creative? I mean, when we create our harmonic resonance patterns, we follow very specific mathematical formulas. Every note has to be precisely calculated to maintain universal balance. But humans just make things. Art and music and stories, and they don't follow any rules at all. How do they know if what they're making is good?" Emma leaned back in her chair, recognizing the real question underneath. "Quixel, how long have you been making harmonic resonance patterns?" 3,472 years. I'm considered quite young for a master harmonist. And in all that time, have you ever made something that surprised you? Something that didn't follow your formulas but felt right anyway?" Quixel's crystalline features somehow managed to look wistful. "Once. I was working on a ceremonial piece for the Cosmic Council, and I accidentally introduced a frequency variation that should have destroyed the entire harmonic structure. But instead, it was beautiful. More beautiful than anything I'd ever created. It made my fellow crystallines feel something they'd never experienced before. What happened to it? I destroyed it. It wasn't mathematically sound. It couldn't be replicated or explained. The council would have been horrified." Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a small recording device, the kind she used to capture her students' first attempts at reading. "Quixel, could you recreate that pattern now, just for us?" "I couldn't. It would be against every principle of harmonic creation. What if I told you that making mistakes is how humans learn to be creative? What if I said that the best art comes from happy accidents and trying things that shouldn't work?" Quixel looked around the table at his companions, then back at Emma. Very quietly, he began to hum. The sound that emerged was unlike anything Emma had ever heard. It was complex and mathematical, yes, but underneath the precision was something wild and joyful and completely unpredictable. It was the sound of someone who'd been following rules their entire life, suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. When he finished, the silence was profound. Even the space station's mechanical humming seemed to pause in respect. "That was beautiful," Emma said simply. "That was absolutely beautiful." Admiral Blaster wiped what might have been a tear from his eye, though he tried to disguise it as adjusting his battle helmet. "Admiral Blaster doesn't cry," he muttered. "Admiral Blaster experiences tactical moisture overflow." Emma turned to him with the same gentle attention she'd given Quixel. "Blaster, can I ask you something? What did you want to be before you became a military leader?" The question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, suddenly looking much smaller despite his impressive bulk. "I wanted to be a builder. My people, the Zephyrians, we used to be builders. Great cities, impossible structures, things that defied gravity and common sense but somehow stood for millennia. But then the wars started, and builders became engineers, and engineers became weapon designers, and weapon designers became military command." "When was the last time you built something?" I don't remember. Centuries, maybe? We don't build anymore. We only tear down." Emma pulled out her tablet and started sketching something. "What if I told you that humans see destruction and creation as 2 parts of the same process? We tear down old buildings to make room for new ones. We break eggs to make cake. We compost dead plants to help new ones grow." She turned the tablet around to show a simple drawing of a garden, with wilted flowers being removed to make space for new seedlings. What if military strategy could be about building safe spaces instead of destroying unsafe ones? Blaster stared at the drawing like it was written in a language he'd forgotten he knew. "You mean protective construction instead of offensive destruction?" "I mean, maybe there's a way to be strong that doesn't require making everyone else weak." Professor Intellicus Prime had been unusually quiet during these exchanges, methodically eating his animal crackers with the precision of someone performing a scientific experiment. Finally, he cleared his throat with the particular sound that meant he had something important to say but wasn't sure how to say it. "Miss Emma, May I confess something that is intellectually embarrassing? Of course, I have been studying human behavior for decades, trying to understand how a species with such apparent intellectual limitations could achieve such remarkable innovations. My research led me to conclude that humans must possess some form of collective intelligence that compensated for individual inadequacy. He paused, looking uncomfortable. Last week, I discovered I was completely wrong. I accessed the personal logs of a human engineer who solved a problem that had stumped our best scientists for years. Do you know what her methodology was? Emma waited patiently. She was frustrated with the established approach, so she took a nap. While napping, she dreamed about her childhood dog chasing its tail. She woke up and realized that the solution wasn't to fight the problem's circular nature, but to use it. She spent 15 minutes sketching her idea on the back of a napkin, and it worked perfectly. Intellicus Prime removed his glasses and cleaned them with shaking hands. 15 minutes and a napkin. We spent 3 years and consumed the computational power of an entire planet trying to solve the same problem. Her approach was so simple, so intuitive, so utterly illogical that it never occurred to any of us to try it. And how did that make you feel? Obsolete, humiliated, and... He struggled with the word. Fascinated. I've spent my entire existence believing that intelligence meant knowing all the answers. But humans seem to believe that intelligence means knowing how to find answers you didn't know existed. I've never experienced that kind of discovery. Every problem I solve by applying knowledge I already possess. I've never had the joy of being surprised by my own mind. Emma looked around the table at 3 beings who had just revealed their deepest insecurities and longings. Quixel wanted to create without rules. Blaster wanted to build instead of destroy. Intellicus wanted to discover instead of just knowing. They weren't angry at humanity for being chaotic. They were heartbroken that they'd been taught chaos was wrong. Gentlemen, she said gently, I think I understand what's really happening here. You're not upset because humans are different from you. You're upset because you're not allowed to be different from yourselves. The truth hung in the air like morning fog, visible but fragile, waiting to see if anyone would acknowledge it or pretend it wasn't there. Quixel was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. The crystalline collective would never approve of harmonic experimentation. Deviation from mathematical perfection is considered a form of madness. The Military Council of Zephyria hasn't authorized a construction project in over 2,000 years, Blaster added. Building is considered a waste of resources that could be used for weapons. The Cerebral Collective believes that admitting ignorance is a sign of intellectual failure, Intellicus concluded. Curiosity is seen as evidence that one's education was inadequate. Emma nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place like a puzzle solving itself. So, when you see humans being creative and chaotic and curious and proud of it, it doesn't just threaten your government's control. It threatens the whole foundation of how your societies work. If our people saw humans being rewarded for the behaviors we've been taught to suppress, Quixel began, if they realized that not knowing something could be the beginning of discovery instead of the end of credibility, Intellicus continued, if they understood that strength could come from creating instead of destroying, Blaster finished, then your people might start asking why they're not allowed to do those things too, Emma completed. And that's what your governments are really afraid of. Not human chaos, human freedom. The silence that followed was the sound of 3 individuals realizing they'd been fighting the wrong war entirely. Emma had seen this moment before, though never quite on this scale. It was the moment when children stopped pretending to be what adults expected them to be, and started figuring out who they actually were. It was scary and exciting, and usually resulted in either spectacular growth or spectacular meltdowns. Sometimes both. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her photos, the same way she did when her students needed to see that other people had survived being different. Can I show you something? She asked, turning her phone toward the 3 aliens. This is my classroom back on Earth. The image showed 26 5-year-olds engaged in what could generously be called organized chaos. Some were building impossible towers out of blocks that defied several laws of physics. Others were finger-painting what appeared to be abstract representations of their feelings. In one corner, a small boy was explaining quantum mechanics to a stuffed dinosaur, while nearby a girl had constructed an elaborate fairy house out of recycled materials and pure imagination. The other station had legs. This, Emma said, is what humans look like when they're allowed to be themselves. Messy, creative, illogical, and absolutely magnificent. Kazriel leaned closer to the screen, his crystalline features reflecting the image. They're all doing different things. There's no organization, no systematic approach, no adherence to universal standards. And yet, Intellicus observed, his analytical mind kicking in despite himself, they appear to be learning. That child's block structure shouldn't be stable, but it is. That painting has no recognizable form, but it clearly communicates emotional content. It's like watching controlled chaos. Controlled chaos, Blaster repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. That's not a military concept we have. Chaos is the enemy of order. Order is the foundation of discipline. Discipline ensures survival. Emma swiped to another photo, this one showing the same children a month later, working together to build a massive fort out of cardboard boxes, each contributing their unique skills and ideas to create something none of them could have built alone. Here's the same kids a few weeks later. See how Tommy, who couldn't sit still long enough to listen to a story, became the project manager because he could keep track of all the moving parts? And Sarah, who was too shy to speak up in group discussions, became the chief architect because she could visualize how all the pieces fit together. She looked up at the three aliens who were staring at the photo with expressions of wonder and confusion. This is what happens when you let people be different instead of forcing them to be the same. You get better results, not worse ones. Quixel's voice was very small. What if my people were allowed to experiment with their harmonic patterns? What if we could create something beautiful instead of just mathematically correct? What if my people remembered how to build? Blaster added, his usual booming voice reduced to a whisper. What if we used our engineering skills to create instead of destroy? What if my people were allowed to say, I don't know, without being considered failures? Intellicus concluded. What if curiosity was celebrated instead of punished? Emma smiled the same smile she used when her students finally grasped a concept they'd been struggling with. What if we found out together? She pulled out her emergency planning supplies, the same materials she used when her class needed to solve a problem collaboratively. Markers, sticky notes, and a large sheet of paper that she spread across the table. Okay, gentlemen, here's what we're going to do. We're going to plan the universe's first intergalactic cultural exchange program. Not a diplomatic summit, or a military alliance, or a trade agreement. A playdate. The three aliens blinked at her in unison. Playdate, she repeated firmly. We're going to bring together humans and members of your species in a safe, supervised environment where everyone can learn from each other without any pressure to be perfect or follow rules or meet expectations. She drew a circle in the center of the paper and wrote Galactic Friendship Project inside it. Quixel, what would happen if some of your people came to Earth and heard human music, not to judge it or analyze it, but just to experience it? Quixel's crystalline form began to glow softly. They would probably try to harmonize with it. We can't help ourselves. But human music doesn't follow our mathematical patterns, so the harmonies would be unpredictable. Exactly. And what if some humans heard your harmonic resonance patterns? They'd probably try to dance to them or sing along or find the rhythm. They wouldn't know they were supposed to appreciate the mathematical precision. They'd just respond to whatever moved them. Emma wrote music exchange in one section of the paper and drew lines connecting it to the center. Blaster, what if your people came to Earth during what we call a barn raising? When an entire community comes together to build something for someone who needs it. Blaster's eyes lit up like a child who'd just been told Christmas was coming early. They would want to help. Building is in our nature, even though we've forgotten it. But we would probably try to make it more efficient, more structurally sound, more impressive. And humans would probably ask you to teach them your engineering techniques while they showed you how to make the building feel like a home, instead of just a structure. Everyone would learn something new. Construction collaboration went into another section of the paper. Intellicus, what if your people were invited to human universities not as teachers but as research partners? What if you worked together on problems that neither species could solve alone? Intellicus Prime straightened with excitement, his usual condescension replaced by genuine enthusiasm. The possibilities would be extraordinary. Human intuitive leaps combined with our analytical frameworks could produce discoveries that neither approach could achieve independently. We could learn to be surprised, and they could learn to be systematic. Joint Research Initiative joined the growing web of connections on the paper. As they brainstormed, something magical happened. The three aliens stopped thinking like representatives of their governments and started thinking like themselves. Quixel suggested art exchanges where human painters could work with crystalline light sculptors. Blaster proposed engineering competitions where the goal was to build the most beautiful structure, not the most defensive one. Intellicus outlined a program where human children could ask questions that stumped adult academics, and academic adults could help children understand the wonder behind the answers. But wait, Quixel said suddenly, his glow dimming. Our governments would never approve this. They sent us here to end the human threat, not befriend it. Emma pulled out 3 more gold star stickers and placed them in front of each alien. Guys, look at what you've accomplished in the last hour. You've moved from wanting to destroy humanity to designing programs that could benefit everyone. You've admitted your real feelings, identified the actual problems, and created solutions that address everyone's needs. She gestured to the paper, now covered with ideas and connections and possibilities. This isn't just a plan for human-alien cooperation. This is evidence that cooperation works better than conflict. This is proof that diversity makes everyone stronger, not weaker. Blaster studied the planning sheet with the intensity he usually reserved for battle tactics. You're suggesting we present this to our governments as the solution to the human problem. I'm suggesting you present this as evidence that there was never a human problem in the first place. There was a freedom problem, a creativity problem, a curiosity problem. And the solution isn't to eliminate the beings who have those things, it's to learn from them. Antelicus Prime was already making calculations in his head, Emma could tell. The statistical probability of our governments accepting this proposal is approximately 0.003%. What's the statistical probability of them accepting your original plan to wipe out humanity? Approximately 99.7%. And how did that plan make you feel? Antelicus paused, considering. Terrible, absolutely terrible, like we were about to destroy something irreplaceably beautiful out of fear and ignorance. Emma nodded. Sometimes the right choice isn't the probable choice. Sometimes the right choice is the choice that helps everyone become who they're supposed to be, instead of who they're expected to be. She stood up and began packing her supplies, the same way she did at the end of every successful parent-teacher conference. Gentlemen, I'm going to leave you with homework. I want each of you to go back to your governments and tell them the truth. Not the truth they want to hear, but the truth that needs to be said. Tell them what you discovered about yourselves today. Tell them what you learned about cooperation versus competition. And tell them that humanity isn't a threat to be eliminated. We're a mirror that shows other species what they could become if they weren't afraid to be themselves. She handed each of them a juice box for the road and a small packet of gold star stickers. And if they don't listen the first time, try again. Sometimes adults need to hear important things more than once before they really understand them. Quixel accepted his supplies with something approaching reverence. What if this doesn't work? What if our governments decide to proceed with the original plan? Emma smiled and shouldered her bag, ready to head back to her ship and eventually to her classroom, where 26 small humans were waiting to hear about her adventure among the stars. Then we'll try something else. That's what humans do. We keep trying new approaches until something works. And now you know how to do that, too. As she walked toward the docking bay, she could hear the 3 aliens behind her, already deep in planning how to present their case to their respective governments. Their voices carried the excitement of children who had just discovered they were allowed to dream. 3 months later, Emma received a message on the same secure line that had first brought her into this cosmic adventure. This time, it wasn't President Rodriguez calling with another impossible situation. It was Ambassador Quixel, his crystalline voice practically vibrating with joy. Miss Emma, you have to see this. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to establish the Universal Friendship Accords. Blaster's people are sending a construction team to help rebuild the hurricane damage in Florida, and Intellicus's species wants to establish joint research programs at 50 human universities. My harmonists are collaborating with your musicians on something they're calling mathematical jazz, and it's the most beautiful thing we've ever created. Emma smiled as she listened, watching her students work on their latest project, a scale model of the solar system that somehow included alien friends on every planet. Mr. Whiskers the hamster supervised from his wheel, probably the only being on Earth who wasn't impressed by humanity's first successful intergalactic diplomacy. And the best part, Quixel continued, is that other species are asking to join the program. It turns out we weren't the only ones who were tired of being perfect all the time. Half the galaxy wants to learn how to be beautifully, chaotically, creatively imperfect, like humans. Emma picked up a crayon and helped Tommy add rings to Saturn, thinking about how strange and wonderful it was that the same qualities that had nearly gotten humanity destroyed were now being celebrated across the stars. Miss Emma, little Sarah tugged on her sleeve. When we grow up, can we go visit your space friends? Emma looked around her classroom, at 26 small faces full of curiosity and creativity and the kind of beautiful chaos that had somehow saved the world, and grinned. Sweetie, I think your space friends are going to come visit you first, and when they do, we're going to teach them the most important lesson humanity has to offer. What's that? That it's okay to color outside the lines sometimes. In fact, that's where all the best art happens. Outside her classroom window, the first of the Crystalline Collective's harmonic resonance generators was being installed in the school's music room, ready to help her students discover what happened when mathematical perfection met 5-year-old imagination. Emma had a feeling it was going to be absolutely beautiful chaos. And somewhere in the depths of space, Admiral Blaster McBestroy was putting the finishing touches on the galaxy's first peacekeeping construction fleet. Professor Intellicus Prime was drafting his first academic paper titled The Joy of Not Knowing, A Beginner's Guide to Wonder. And Ambassador Quixel was composing a harmonic pattern that had no mathematical basis whatsoever, but somehow made everyone who heard it want to dance. The universe, as it turned out, was a much more interesting place when everyone was allowed to be themselves.